what President Trump said. Okay, so on top of the Truth Social post, he said to the Islamic Republic, President Trump said, "You close it," meaning the Strait of Hormuz. "You close it, and you won't have a country." President Trump said he told the Iranian officials about the Strait of Hormuz, "You won't even make it back to your fucking country," basically threatening them with death. The politicians in Switzerland right now that are discussing the MOU and negotiations, President Trump said, "If you close the Strait of Hormuz, you won't make it back to your fucking country." And then he said this. He said, "We may take the strait if we have to," Trump said. "If they don't make a deal, we'll collect tolls." And so basically President Trump doing an Uno reverse card on the Islamic Republic, saying that we collect tolls. President Trump is saying like, "No, we collect tolls." And then Trump said, Trump added the US could become the guardian angel of the strait and take 20% of the oil, which is an unbelievable amount of for the toll. Um, the Islamic Republic, yeah, well, I mean, again, remember President Trump, this is, says stuff like this to throw people off and shock people and confuse the fuck out of people, and sometimes these things turn into reality and many times they don't. So just but this is but whatever happens, the comment itself is going to put a lot of pressure on the Islamic Republic officials doing the negotiation not to do the negotiation. We already had a member of parliament, Nabavian, within the Islamic Republic, coming out and saying how much more humiliation can you take before you cancel the negotiations. So there's going to be, like, in the next 24 hours in Iran, we're going to see a lot of pressure from pro-regime, anti-deal people to just completely cut off the negotiations with the Americans, because this was so insulting. And continuing the negotiations after accepting this much humiliation from President Trump is something that they cannot tolerate. So we'll see how Ghalibaf manages to find a way to go back to the negotiating table after this comment by President Trump. You'll find a way. Okay, so I have one? Is there any other twos, or am I doing super chat?
I
Oh.
Yes, I don't think there's any. Oh, okay. We have a last second tune in for Karsten. I don't believe I've seen Karsten before, so I'd like to welcome you also. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Okay. I've been here once before a while ago. Armin, a few days ago, I sent you my take on the Memorandum of Understanding. That which would explain why the IRGC is so unhappy with it. It's not a US surrender, it's a very elegant terms of surrender for Iran. Because it's not 300 million as was proposed to the Iranian state. It is 300 million of direct investment from private hands, which basically compels any future Iranian economy to comply with a Western economic system, private capital, Western-linked firms, banks, insurances, aviation, and so on, mixed with sanctions being lifted, which means if Iran wants to replace its airlines, well, they're going to have to go to Boeing and Airbus.
So let me tell you about the 300 billion, because we discussed this in a lot of detail on our show. The $300 billion is from private companies to private investments within Iran, which means
That's what
a lot. Yeah, I know. I'm just. That's
Sorry.
what I. Yeah, I'm speaking. Let me just finish my point, please. If you do mind closing your microphone while I'm speaking, thank you. So yeah, when I'm making my point, I'm not denying what you said. I'm just telling you what I have been saying on my live stream. This is not a point against you, so you don't need to say that's what I said. So because this is supposed to be an investment fund that private companies could invest in to go and invest in Iran. First of all, this has already been tried, something similar with the JCPOA, and they promised a lot more than $300 billion. Guess how much of it actually happened? How like I think it was like $1 trillion promises of private investments inside Iran. Guess so, like if you guys want to write it in the chat, how much of that do you think happened? How much of that $1 trillion? Zero, zero, zero. Okay, because first of all, there's two reasons why it's really difficult and close to impossible. So so United States can be like, hey, sure, let's have private companies invest in Iran. Okay, yeah, exactly. People are saying zero in the chat. You can't force private companies to go invest in Iran. Private companies, if they want to invest in Iran, they're going to notice two things. Two things. One, they're going to notice that the IRGC is in charge. The IRGC has monopoly over most industries in Iran, and there's makes no sense for the private sector to invest with a government controlled economy. The private sector cannot grow against such command economy so controlled by the state, where it's monopolizing the main industries. So private investors are going to be like, well, fuck no. If I want to go invest in Iran, there's two threats. There's two different IRGC threats against me. One, how could my private sector compete with the state? Two, there's the IRGC also, every time a private company grows in Iran and becomes significant, they come and take it. They do a hostile takeover. They come and take it from you. And then there's nothing you could do about it. So with the current conditions, with the IRGC in charge within the Islamic Republic, in private sector investing in Iran is basically burning your money, right? That's one reason. Two, you might say, like, well, okay, they could try to deregulate and privatize, and the IRGC might because for the sake of their survival, loosen things up. Honestly, I would fucking love that, because if for the sake of all this, they open their economy and they try to let go of their grip over the economy, if that ever happens, that means the weakening of the IRGC. The IRGC is in power within the Islamic Republic because they are isolationist, they have a command economy, they have monopolies, and they fucking destroy the private sector every time it becomes competitive. This is why they have a grip over the economy. Militarily, they are very powerful because of their anti-Americanism and anti-Israeli agenda. Like, that's why they can't let go of being anti-American and anti-Israeli, because their pan-Islamist Shia imperialism will basically break apart if they let go of that. So they need that. So but if you could figure out a way to force the IRGC to let go of its grip over the economy, that will weaken them, which gets us closer to finally getting rid of the Islamic Republic. The problem is, if I'm a private company, I'm very risk averse. So I see, like, oh my God, they're changing the regulations. Maybe there's sanctions removal, and IRGC is cooperating and opening the economy. I don't know if this is gonna keep going in that direction. Everything could, the sanctions could be removed, maybe, and they could come right back up. I don't know, maybe another October 7th happens, maybe another, I don't know, maybe another president decides to go back and bomb the a new enrichment facility that they figured out somewhere in Iran, and the sanctions would just come back right up, right? So even if United States and other governments come out and say, like, guys, we're doing this, we're doing that, things are good, this is a very unstable situation, and this is not a very stable part of the world. People are reconsidering investing in the UAE. Okay, so given that the UAE doesn't seem as safe as before, do you think capital is going to flow towards Iran when they see that, okay, yeah, sanctions removal could come back up, and also deregulation and privatization by the IRGC? They have all their military. That could be a trap. It could be a trap. Like, hey, look, guys, we're privatizing, we're deregulating, and the money by these Arab countries could come in, and they were like, oops, sorry, we're going to go back to our old ways, and now all your capital is stuck inside the country, and IRGC is not going to give it back. In fact, they're going to be like, we're going to keep all of these for the damages that you did to us because of helping with the Zionists, and you bombed our country, and we're collecting by freezing your assets and holding all your, hey, like, wasn't it the UAE that all of a sudden froze all our assets in our financial institutions in the UAE? So thank you for all the investments in Iran. We're not going to do the same thing to you. We're going to go freeze everything you have here and not give it back to you. You know, maybe in the next war, if there's a blockade on the Islamic Republic is going to go and take out freeze all of the assets of the private companies in Iran and just hold them as a way to fund its war. So if I'm a private company, even if United States signals to me that, hey, come and put money in this investment fund, I'm gonna be like, hey, no, hell no. Like, I'm gonna stay away from this. I mean, even the Arab countries are taking their own money in the Arab countries around the Persian Gulf out of their own countries, putting it in the US as a way to save them from losing their money. Like, the Arab billionaires around the Persian Gulf, they don't even, some of them are not even finding their own country safe enough to invest in, let alone the like Iran under the Islamic Republic. But anyways, that's the problem. Go on. Sorry for interrupting you, Kirsten.
Yes, I largely agree with the problem. The situation, how as I see it, has changed. Iran is in a liquidity crisis. A bunch of their economic assets, and especially the military assets, have been blown up. The state is already in a deep legitimacy crisis because, well, the U.S. Air Force and the Israelis have been flying circles around over their cities. Yes, they've been shooting missiles back. You got to give them credit where credit is due, but it's still humiliating. So the one thing I can see an Iranian government being able to sell is economic upturn. So technically, for a venture capitalist, Iran is an ideal investment place if the sanctions fall.
No, it's
The
not.
way I thought.
It's not an ideal. It's not at all. If the sanctions fall, they could come back up. It's not Iran under the IRGC is not at all an ideal investment place. You have a
Oh,
command
okay.
economy. You have a command economy, and you have an IRGC that could come and be like, "Oh, it's a nice company that you have there. It would be a shame if I just froze all your assets and then fund my terrorist activities with it." So it's not at all a safe investment. They have a liquidity crisis, and that's why if I bring money there, next time they have even a more liquidity crisis, they might decide to just basically take all my assets, right? And it would. I mean, it just seems like a trap. It doesn't look ideal. So yeah, you're right. They're desperate for cash. But if I'm a big venture capital or private equity firm or an investment bank or like an Arab investment fund, like, I mean, I don't know, some of these Arab investment funds, the people who are running them, they're retarded. So you might be right, they might invest in Iran. um so some of these Arab investment funds, the only reason why they're so big is because they have oil money, and they're not really actually good at picking investments. They're just rich because they have oil money. So you're right, some of the Arab investment funds, they're retarded, they might actually take the bait. But again, if anybody was sane enough, they would be like, this is too risky, it's not worth the risk, right? Iran is a great place to
Yeah, okay.
invest, but not with the Islamic Republic in charge.
Yeah, okay. Obviously, yeah.
Mm.
Uh, the way I saw the IRGC is the country has so little money, it's not worth shutting the tap by seizing assets. And
Yeah,
once
but
the benefits more from basically being integrated into a wider economic net, it's you gave the population. You already lost the war. You already accepted a semi-defeat against the Americans and Israelis, which is bad enough. Then there was an economic upturn, and now you have something to lose again. So shutting that tap by, for instance, seizing assets,
Hmm. let
far
me
more
let me tell you something about the IRGC. Okay, the IRGC was getting most of its money around the sanctions through loopholes possible by financial institutions in the UAE. They fucking bombed the UAE, right? So they bombed they bombed the country where they had all the financial institutions that they used to go around the sanctions. So you might think like, okay, well, if they start getting money, they're not going to go against them. They bombed the UAE the country that had all the financial institutions that they were using to go around the sanctions. So if you might think like, okay, they're not going to, if they're getting money, they're not going to do anything against it. Well, they did. So it's not trust. They're crazy. Yeah. Go on.
Okay, well, it was worth a thought experiment. Thank you for your
Yeah.
time.
It was.
All right. I had a quick comment that we tried this with China and it didn't work out well. They take 51% of the company. And next on this topic is Jose. He may be able to orient us about Caesa and how you see Ezra. I think he knows where I'm going with this. The problem when you have a command economy is what Armin and what happened with China. They take over, and when they need, they take. They're not going to be logical actors, especially in Iran. These aren't logical, intelligent actors. If you're going off the logically, it makes perfect sense, right? Get them addicted to doing good things and having profit and having a higher standard of living. Yeah, sure. But if they don't care about that, that's the problem. Now, go on, Jose.
Yeah, you guessed correctly. Cuba has also put out an economic plan. This is the third time in their history that they've done so. Let me talk to you about the last time. A French billionaire invested heavily into a restaurant chain in Cuba. He was told who to hire. He was told what to charge. He was told what to pay. Okay. He was told how to do everything. And it was 55% to the Cuban government, 45% to him. He also had to pay for all the startup costs out of his 45%. So they robbed him blind. Literally, after about a year, he tried to get out of the contract, and they threatened to throw him and his family in jail in order to get him to sign off and give him the rest of the money. Okay? I've had people in our chat group here when I posted that there's something interesting happening in Cuba. One guy posted, "Oh, but it's going to be okay now because they're going to start all these businesses and all this money flow in." No, 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 no. There isn't a Cuban of the one group that would do that. They're called the Cuban Exile Community. We ain't that stupid. We know how the government works. We know that the guy that mentioned that is Fidel Castro's grandson, and the guy that ran the last scam was none other than Fidel Castro. Old playbook. It's happened before. I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening it's still happening in China. There's so many businesses that have not produced or not produced enough income that they literally. Do you guys know what happened recently in China? Let me tell you a little story. Jeff, you're gonna love this. The factories of the world that were making all this stuff for the world, all this made in China stuff, they thought it would be easier if they replaced all of their human workers with robots. Okay. Well, their number one client in the world was the Chinese people that they had just made unemployed, not making any income whatsoever. The big cities, the big factory towns in China are emptying out, and the people are heading back out in the country and living off whatever they can scrounge from the local fauna. It's gotten worse than people can imagine in China for the actual people living there. Okay? The thing that you got to understand is those robots that replaced it, they were making perfect replications of what the humans were making as far as clothing, robot, little tiny toys, and all this stuff. The robots are on the trash heap because the companies all went out of business because they forgot who their original customer was, which was their own employees. And that's the thing about the IRGC. They're not that different from the Communist Party. I could very well easily see them setting up a system like China or Cuba has done in the past, which is basically puts money into the people that are running the country and not helping the people at all that are there. So you got to be careful when you think the plan's going to work. It sounds like a great plan. Yeah. Raza Pahlavi and the new government takeover, they stabilize. That's the time to go into Iran, not before. Not before. Not leaving any structure of the current government in charge. That is the biggest mistake you can make. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm sorry to rant.
I think that was a good rant. I agree. Guys is terrible. And I think we had, okay, I want to speak on this a little bit. China is falling apart because of this. They had the command economy move to EVs. Then their EVs were badly made. A whole bunch of nations didn't want them. They had their command economy take control of their military. The military turned out terrible. When you have investment from the outside, you also have exposure. One of the problems with TikTok was that you're having, my apologies, you're having, let's say you have an internet business with Iran. You have a social media in Farsi or something, right? In Persian, right? So what's it going to do? You're going to expose people's data. You're going to expose information. You're going to expose your banking information. You're going to expose any employees you have to this system. Anybody that has dealt with China knows that doing business with them means you're opening up all your customers to their data being scraped and used and manipulated, and they can do whatever they want with it, really, with the Chinese system. Do you want a business? Let's say you serve customers and you're trying to fabricate something straight out of Iran and you're trying to ship it and you got so many customers or blah blah blah. Whatever you're trying to do in Iran, the IRGC will have command and control. The last part of what Jose said, I also think is very important. Now, let's say there's a transitional government and you start doing business for rebuilding and having private businesses come in and have it under the Nufti transitional government with, with Pahlavi. And now that could be an explosion in entrepreneurship and, commerce. That could be fantastic. Now, my next two over here is Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff.
That's a lot of different points kind of dancing around a very important topic, which is the role that foreign direct investment plays in, especially when it's done inside areas that are not secure or are controlled by an actor that views you from a hostile or competitive perspective. The example of the Chinese Communist Party is very applicable. So the Chinese Communist Party, after Mao Zedong died, very much set up special economic zones with the stated goal of spurring foreign direct investment in China. It particularly focused on sectors of the economy that had a maximum amount of dual purpose technology and our crossover between civilian and military application. The goal of that was to exacerbate technical diffusion from the United States post-industrial knowledge-based core to the Chinese Communist Party that operates in the periphery. That evolved even more over time, right? So you have the Soviet Union collapse, the Sino-Soviet, that means the marriage of convenience that we had again with the Chinese Communist Party in the latter part of the Soviet of the Cold War evaporates. The Chinese Communist Party now focuses on the second stage of that strategy, which is to exacerbate the technical diffusion from the United States to the Chinese Communist Party because they're trying to compete with us. And how did that manifest itself? Well, they bribe our politicians with fucking donations to their campaign funds, like the hundreds of thousands of dollars illegally given to Clinton's campaign. John Kerry, a couple others, right? They do things like forced technical transfer for those that invest in China. You have the largest espionage campaign against the United States, the likes of which wasn't even realized at the height of the Cold War by the Soviet Union, violating all the agreements they signed. They didn't adhere, so the Chinese Communist Party, when it was given most favored trade status and inducted into WTO, they were not supposed to artificially deflate their gain. They were supposed to fully privatize their companies. None of that shit happened. That said, if you have so much foreign direct investment in that nation, the Chi-Coms use that as leverage to deflect any kind of response to their belligerency, because they're going to use our companies and went, wow, we have $37 trillion of physical capital in China. I don't want to piss them off because they'll steal everything. That's exactly one of the things the Chinese Communist Party used to deflect, being punished for the Chinese Communist Party pandemic, Wuhan, COVID-19. This also applies with regards to the investment in regime remnant illegally occupied Iran, even more so, because the pseudo-theological nature that defines the Islam, the Mullah regime, means that the primary context of how they frame gain or loss is not physical, it's metaphysical. Armin's right on the money. That's why, even though the Mullah regime and now Mullah remnants, while they don't have the same level of relative comprehensive national power, say, as the Chinese Communist Party or even Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state, is uniquely dangerous, it's because they aren't deterred by normal shit. So yeah, they'll grab your stuff. They don't care. They don't care. They care about, what the 12th Imam allegedly says out of a well and all the other crazy shit that I don't want to go through and belabor. Armin very much hammered all that, down tight. So yeah, I have a lot of, I don't want any investment in Iran while it's the second time now, while it's still occupied by the regime remnants, they have to go. That's not the same. Understand, this has nothing to do with Iranian people, right? Like, I have no problem with Iranian people having access to nuclear power. I have a problem with the fucking Mullah regime remnants having access to nuclear power. Like, Iran's nuclear power program under the Shah was a legit civilian nuclear power program. I wouldn't even mind if they buried it and hardened it. It's not the technology. It's the assholes who have access to it. And that's the same when it comes to physical capita, right? Or financial investment. You're right on the money, Armin. Well done.
Thank you.
All right, that's a twos on it, and I agree completely.
I had it too. But go on, you go first.
What I was going to say on this is we do have some perhaps breaking news about some explosions and a report from Nail Bunny. So let's go to your two. What do you have to say on all this?
So okay, then let's I'll say this fast so that we could go to Nail Bunny after this. I'm just gonna say, guys, it's true within the IRGC we have some ideological Shia end of times garbage that makes it even more um irrational when it comes to how they manage the economy. And I mean, it's irrational, but it's also rational when it comes to their agenda. Their whole purpose is, it makes a lot more sense what the IRGC is doing if you understand that their goal is not to make Iran prosperous. Their goal is to use Iran's resources to create their pan-Islamic Shia empire and export the revolution. If you look at it from that angle, a lot of what they do makes a lot more sense. um and then, so it would make logical sense if that was the purpose, but it doesn't make logical sense because that's a retarded purpose. But that being aside, if you put that the ideology around, aside, no command economy can function rationally because there's no group of elite individuals, even if they were smart. So these people are jihadi minded. But I could tell you, even if they weren't, and they were smart, and they were experts in economy and finance and whatever industry that is required, like, and they were good, it was based on merit, and these were the best people in the field in whatever needs to happen to make, when it comes, they know how to invest, they know how to evaluate, different economic metrics and what to follow. If the economy is command based, your economy will be retarded. Like, capital will not flow to the places that it would be. Irrational decisions would be made. No amount of elites will ever be able to match the wisdom of the market, the wisdom of the crowd. It has an emerge when you give people liberty, the wisdom of the crowd, even if the crowd individually is not smart. When we say the wisdom of the crowd, people think we're talking about the sum of the wisdom of the people within that society. That's not what we're talking about. The wisdom of the crowd has this emergent property that even if your society is not very smart, it's a different wisdom. It's not the sum of the wisdom of the people within society. It's a Darwinian process. It's emergent. It's an emergent property of just allowing people to be free and have liberty. The way an analogy to that is like, if you look at every individual ant, you're never going to see the wisdom of a colony. Every single ant operates by very basic, very simple, not very intelligent rules. But when you look at the entire colony, it looks like it has a mind of its own, and it does things that are so much above whatever is coded in every single individual ant. This is called emergence, and you also see it in society. This is why free market works. When you give people liberty, what the result of it is some level of wisdom that no amount of elite individuals can get. The amount of data within the market is too high for any group of elite people to account for. The amount of the data that gets recorded with each single transaction and the adjustments that is made based on the simple laws and demands of demand and supply, it's too much data for any person to be able to take it, for any group of wise individuals to take into account. And that is why liberty works. Liberty works in politics, liberty works in economics. Anyways.
All right. Before we go to Nail Bunny, the chat has been talking to me about breaking news. There may be some explosions in Doha. This appears to be confirmed. I want to get to Nail Bunny, and perhaps you in the background could have a little check if we could cover this. Nail Bunny has an update on UK. I'm just trying to like give you like something to work in the background. You decide if we go into it or not. If not, I'll just keep running through the topics. Is that good?
Jim, so yeah, Jim put it to, do we want to do Jim or do we do Nail Bunny?
I must have missed it because I was looking for the Qatar
Yeah,
thing. If
I also-
yes, Jim, please go ahead. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
and I also don't want to lose Nail Bunny because Nail Bunny usually doesn't speak, and when she speaks, I really get happy. So Jim, and then Nail Bunny, please don't go. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem, Armin. What you're talking about here, I'll make it very brief. You're talking about Friedrich Hayek, of all people, actually came across this theory by calling this the spontaneous order. His quote in The Fatal Conceit is, "The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they can imagine they can design. That's why command economies never work. There is too much information about the supply of one good and its cost relative to how much people demand of it. There is no human being that can manage 50 people's desires, wants, and needs that they have internally, let alone 50 billion, let alone 500 billion. That there's no way anybody can plan that accurately. It's why we need a price system. It's manipulated by central banks like our Federal Reserve and Iran's central bank that set money and credit with no market incentive to correct it. But that's a story for a different day. But when you have the price system working naturally, you have the ebb and flow of high demand, high cost, equal out everything else. It's complex, but I'll get into it in a different day. But that's really what you're looking at is the spontaneous order, why central planning doesn't work.
100%, 100%. And Jane, you just joined us, a new member here. Jane, you, thank you so much for joining us. Just letting you. My name is Armin Navabi. I'm an Iranian political analyst with decades of experience fighting the Islamic regime inside and outside of Iran. Make sure you follow me for more, and also make sure you join our discussion group. I'm there almost every single day. Come talk to me there and the rest of the people there in our group calls. It's a great place to meet and talk to people who like talking about politics. The link is in the description and or in the bio. You could also get there by scanning the QR code on the screen. See you there.